History isn't just about dates and battles written in dusty books. It's about people. Real people who lived, breathed, and fought for the ideas we hold dear today. What if you could hear their voices? Listen to their stories, straight from the source. Today, we're stepping back in time, opening the diaries and letters of those who witnessed the birth of a nation. This is Revolutionary Voices, first-hand accounts from the American War of Independence. Let's begin with a voice you might not know, but whose story captures the spirit of the entire revolution. Joseph Plumb Martin was just a teenager, a farm boy from Connecticut. When he enlisted in the Continental Army in 1776, he wasn't a general or a politician. He was just a kid, hungry for adventure. He kept a detailed memoir, one of the most vivid accounts of a common soldier's life ever written. Wrote about the initial excitement, the thrill of marching off to defend liberty. But that excitement quickly faded. He describes the brutal reality of war, the constant hunger that gnawed at his stomach, the bitter cold that seeped into his bones. He writes, "We were often without any food for days on end." Imagine that. Fighting for freedom while your body is screaming for a simple piece of bread. He talks about the lack of proper clothing, how his feet bled, leaving crimson tracks in the snow at Valley Forge because his shoes had long since disintegrated. But it wasn't all suffering. Martin's account is filled with a dark soldier's humor. It tells stories of foraging for food, of narrow escapes, and of the camaraderie he shared with his fellow soldiers. These men from all walks of life became a family, bound together by shared hardship and a common cause. His writings remind us that the Army wasn't an abstract entity. It was made up of thousands of individual boys and men, each with their own fears and hopes. Now, let's shift our perspective from the battlefield to the home front. Meet Sarah Wister, a Quaker teenager living near Philadelphia. The war literally came to her doorstep when General Washington's army camped near her family's home in the autumn of 1777. Her diary is not about battles, but about the daily anxieties and strange encounters of living in a war zone. Sarah was a pacifist, a Quaker, yet she was surrounded by soldiers. Her diary is a fascinating glimpse into the social side of the war. She writes with teenage wit and a bit of flirtation about the officers who were quartered in her house. She gives them nicknames, like the saucy General Smallwood and the charming Major Stoddart. She describes the constant fear of British patrols and the rumble of distant cannons, which she called the most melancholy of sounds. One entry describes a frantic moment when a messenger burst in, shouting that the British were just miles away. Her family scrambled to hide their valuables. Sarah wrote, "I was very much frightened." What a trying time it is. Through her eyes, we see that war wasn't just fought by soldiers. It was endured by everyone. It disrupted daily life, brought fear into homes, and forced ordinary people to navigate extraordinary circumstances. Her diary shows the resilience and adaptability of civilians caught in the conflict. The war also forced people to make impossible choices. Consider the story of Boston King. He was an enslaved man in South Carolina. For him, the word liberty had a much more immediate and personal meaning. When the British Army arrived, they offered freedom to any enslaved person who would join their side. This was the Dunmore Proclamation. But Boston King, this was a life-altering choice. Risk everything for a chance at freedom with the British, or remain in bondage under American patriots who spoke of liberty but practiced slavery. He chose to run. In his narrative, he describes his terrifying escape. paddling a canoe through treacherous waters at night to reach a British ship. He said, "I saw the boat and the people, and my heart leaped with joy." He served the British as a carpenter and guide, but his journey was far from over. When the British lost the war, they evacuated thousands of black loyalists, including Boston King, to Nova Scotia in Canada. Life there was harsh. The land was unforgiving, and racial prejudice was still rampant. Boston King's story is a powerful reminder that the Revolution was not a simple story of good versus evil. For African Americans, it was a complex and often tragic chapter. They had to navigate the competing promises of freedom from both sides. And for many, like King, the fight for true liberty continued long after the Treaty of Paris was signed. His account gives a voice to the thousands who sought their own independence amidst the larger war. Of course, we must hear from the leaders, but not just from their public proclamations. Let's look at the private letters of John and Abigail Adams. Their correspondence is one of the most remarkable collections of letters in American history. While John was in Philadelphia, helping to forge a new nation at the Continental Congress, Abigail was at home in Massachusetts, managing their farm, raising their children, and living under the constant threat of British attack. Their letters are a blend of political debate and deep personal affection. John would write about the tedious debates in Congress, the struggles to unite the colonies, and his longing for home. Abigail would respond with news from the farm, updates on the children, and sharp, insightful political commentary of her own. She was his most trusted advisor. In one of her most famous letters, she urged John to remember the ladies as he and the other founders were drafting new laws. She wrote, "Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could." It was a radical idea for its time, a plea for women's rights from the very heart of the Revolution. Abigail's letters show us that the Revolution wasn't just a political event. It was a philosophical one, challenging old ideas about power, government, and society, even within the family. Finally, let's travel across the Atlantic to hear from an enemy, or at least a soldier on the other side. Baroness Friedrich Charlotte Riedesel was the wife of a German general whose troops were hired by the British. These were the Hessians. She traveled with her 3 young daughters to be with her husband in America. Her journal provides an astonishing perspective on the war from the other side. She wasn't a soldier, but she endured the horrors of the campaign trail. She describes the brutal Battle of Saratoga from a cellar where she was hiding with her children and wounded soldiers. She writes about the cries and groans of the men, and how she tore her own petticoats into bandages. She had to comfort her terrified children as cannonballs crashed into the house above them. After the American victory at Saratoga, she and her husband became prisoners of war. She documents their long journey as captives from New York to Virginia. Surprisingly, she often wrote with admiration for the American people, noting their kindness and resilience, even towards their enemies. Her account shatters the one-dimensional image of the evil Hessians. It shows us that on all sides of the conflict, there were families, fears, and a shared humanity. Her story is a testament to a wife's devotion and a mother's courage in the face of unimaginable chaos. Joseph Plumb Martin, the starving soldier. Sarah Wister, the witty teenager. Boston King, the seeker of freedom. Abigail Adams, the revolutionary partner. And Baroness Riedesel, the enemy witness. These are just a few of the thousands of voices from the American Revolution. Their first-hand accounts strip away the mythology and show us the raw human reality of the war. They remind us that history is not a monument, cold and distant. It's a chorus of real voices, telling real stories of sacrifice, survival, and the messy, complicated, and ultimately inspiring struggle for independence. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found these stories as moving as I did, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments which of these voices resonated with you the most. See you next time.